Today we're going to talk about Republicans humiliating themselves on an international stage, and I interview Vice President Kamala Harris about Trump's conviction, Senate Republicans blocking a vote to guarantee access to contraception, and her reaction to Byron Donald yearning for the Jim Crow era. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So Republicans have managed to find a way to tell on themselves, only now it's on an international stage. So here's what happened. This past week was the 80th anniversary of D-Day, when American troops landed on the beaches of Normandy and would eventually defeat Hitler and the Nazis. Obviously, a momentous occasion, and Biden was on hand to mark the occasion with other world leaders, with Trudeau and Macron and Zelensky. But there was one moment in Biden's speech that set Republicans off.
We talk about democracy, American democracy. We often talk about the ideals of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What we don't talk about is how hard it is. How many ways we're asked to walk away, how many instincts are to walk away. The most natural instinct is to walk away, to be selfish, to force our will upon others, to seize power, never give up. American democracy asks the hardest of things, to believe that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. So democracy begins with each of us. It begins when one person decides there's something more important than themselves. When they decide the person they're serving alongside of is someone to look after. When they decide the mission matters more than their life. When they decide that their country matters more than they do. That's what the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc did. That's what they decided. That's what every soldier and every Marine who stormed these beaches decided. A feared dictator had conquered a continent, had finally met his match. Because of them, the war turned.
And I'll tell you what, Republicans did not like that. Here's one tweet that pretty much embodies the entirety of the criticism on the right. It's from Eric Erickson. I don't think it was appropriate for Biden to turn the remembrance of D-Day into a political attack on his opponent. Now, I want to be clear. Joe Biden did not once utter Donald Trump's name. He didn't even talk about the Republican Party. The guy basically just railed against fascism, which, by the way, would seem fitting for a speech celebrating D-Day, and Republicans decided that by invoking fascism that he was attacking them. Like, you've heard the expression, a hit dog will holler? Not for nothing, but if Joe Biden is criticizing fascists and you feel insulted, then that says a hell of a lot more about you than it does about Joe Biden. But low-rent disinformation peddlers aside, I just want to kind of zoom out a bit. And look, I'm not a rah-rah patriotism guy. Like, I'll always support the troops and whatnot, but I'm not going to show up to a rally draped in an American flag singing the Star-Spangled Banner, right? Which is why it was so moving then to see these veterans, virtually all of whom are wheelchair-bound, going back to Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, where these guys literally saved the world. Like, they saved the world. And it crushes me to know that if the same war happened today, I legitimately don't know which side a whole half of our country would be on. Like, it makes me sad for the state of the world to see these heroes who landed in the beaches of Normandy 80 years ago, and to know that their own country is now teetering on the brink of the very same fascism that these men defeated all those years ago. But here's my pitch. I know we spend a lot of time talking about corrupt politicians and crooked judges and a bought Supreme Court and gerrymanders and voter suppression and insurrections and political violence, and it feels like the whole thing is scientifically engineered to make you throw your hands up in the air, to make you give up, to make you disengage, but don't capitulate to the bad guys. If ever we needed to draw some inspiration, think about those few remaining World War II veterans who are alive today. Think about what they did to beat the fascists. We don't have to parachute into near certain death on the beaches of France, but we do have to fight. We have to recognize our agency here. And most importantly, we have to accept the fact that the courts aren't going to save us, that prosecutors aren't going to save us, that lawyers aren't going to save us. This one's on us. And the sooner we realize that, the less despairing we'll feel if and when the Supreme Court pulls one of their stunts, or if Donald Trump doesn't get sentenced to prison time, for example, or if Republicans are allowed to use a gerrymandered map. Price that in. Expect the worst. And if we win on any of those fronts, great, but that's gravy, that's extra. The only thing we should focus on is what we can control, and that's what happens at the ballot box. So again, find 1 or 2 or 3 people, make them your responsibility. It might feel like a small step, but this election will be won or lost on those small steps, on the margins. But go into this knowing that we live in a country that has beaten the fascists before, and that's a reputation that we should have every intention on keeping. Before we move on, here's a moment from Biden's speech that I think is worth listening to.
I stand here today as the first president to come to Pointe du Hoc when none of those 225 brave men who scaled this cliff on D-Day are still alive. None. But I'm here to tell you that with them gone, The wind we hear coming off this ocean will not fade. It will grow louder as we gather here today. It's not just to honor those who showed such remarkable bravery on that day, June 6, 1944. It's to listen to the echoes of their voices, to hear them, because they are summoning us, and they're summoning us now. They ask us, what will we do? They're not asking us to scale these cliffs, but they're asking us to stay true to what America stands for. They're not asking us to give or risk our lives, but they are asking us to care for others in our country more than ourselves. They're not asking us to do their job. They're asking us to do our job, to protect freedom in our time, to defend democracy, to stand up aggression abroad and at home, to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
Next up is a preview of my interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. One quick note, my new book, Shameless, is available right now for pre-order. You all know that I don't do branded products or put my content behind a paywall. I never will. But if you're looking to support my work, this is the one time I'll ask for some support. So if you want to pre-order Shameless, click the link on the screen or in the post description, or check out briantylercohen.com/book. I really appreciate it. Okay, here's a preview of my interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. Obvious question. You've been a prosecutor. You were a prosecutor for 30 years almost. Your reaction to the Republican nominee for president being a 34-time convicted felon, and for his party, a party that brands itself the Law and Order Party, falling over themselves to back him.
Well, I mean, let's level set. So, 6-week trial, 12 jurors of his peers, unanimously returned verdicts on 34 felony counts. They reviewed evidence, they reviewed the law. His attorney actively participated in choosing that jury. His defense attorney actively made decisions about which witnesses to call, actively engaged in cross-examining the prosecution's witness, and they returned a verdict. And, I think that when you look at what we've seen as the response from the former president and his allies, I mean, their criticism of a system that is a fair system speaks, I think, badly about how they prioritize the rule of law in America. The way I break it down is this. I think that part of what you can attribute to the response that you're getting from him is, cheaters don't like to get caught, and they don't like to be held accountable.
Now, switching gears a little bit, Byron Donalds came out recently and kind of perplexingly expressed a kind of nostalgia for the Jim Crow era, notwithstanding the fact that Byron Donalds himself is black, notwithstanding the fact that he's in an interracial marriage. Can you speak on this eagerness to embrace racism that's pervaded the GOP, especially among the unlikeliest of figures?
I mean, when I look at just what's happening coming out of elected officials from Florida, let's just start there. Yeah. Book bans. Now, the idea in 2024, we have book bans, which are focused on, for example, LGBTQ characters and authors, which are focusing on an attempt to erase, if not rewrite, America's history writ large, especially on the issue of race, the origins of slavery, the impact of slavery. And now to have someone, perpetuate that kind of approach, which is essentially, again, to attempt to erase or rewrite America's history. It is, I think, inexcusable at the highest level.
Donald Trump, too. I mean, this is going all the way up to the top of that party. Donald Trump himself has basically predicated his black outreach by associating people of color with criminality. Do you think that that's going to be an effective approach as we head toward November?
Absolutely not. And it's insulting.
To watch the full interview with Kamala Harris, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen to listen to the audio version, and of course to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.